Hey everyone, and thank you all for watching and welcome back to Crossing Darkness. This is season 2, episode 8. I'm your host, Frozen Fallout, and my co-host today is Motorori.
Moto Hori? Really?
Hey, well, you know,
Hi, everybody.
he's Motorori. Sorry about that. We are broadcasting over Twitch on Sundays, 7 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Central Time. We're a little late today, but and are open to chatting with fans during the show or at the end. Today we are going to be taking a deeper look into the magic system used in Mage the Ascension and kind of just going to go over not just the magic system itself, but talking about ideas of, you know, what would John Wick have, or Spider-Man, or Doctor Strange have for different spheres that they might have. We're also going to take a look at the book called How Do You Do That, which kind of gives us a really good explanation of what spheres would be required for which different actions or different magics that you would like to do, which can kind of cover some of the stuff of what John Wick and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange would need in order to pull off their powers. So we'll probably be digging into that a little bit when we're looking at these different people. So first thing we're going to kind of get into is the magic system, or the different spheres in the magic system. And Mike, you want to just give us a base? What are the 10 different spheres, quote unquote 10?
Well, before we do that, let's discuss how mages actually affect their world. I think we should probably talk first about Avatar.
Okay.
Um,
Yep.
and that's mages have an avatar. That's the difference between them and humans. It's not knowledge that gives you these powers. It's a supernatural force that is attached to your entity, your soul, your person somehow.
Hmm.
Uh, and at some point, it gives you the ability to reweave reality. Uh, and your abilities to reweave reality are then um, limited by your understanding of these different spheres, right?
Right. Yep.
Um, and then each different tradition has their main sphere, but that's a different thing. But anyway, so correspondence, the element of connection between apparently different things. Uh, my experience with correspondence is mostly it's all about distance. First of all, correspondence is what dictates how far away you can affect things. So one
Yeah.
dot in correspondence is actually. Why don't you talk about that for a little bit? Because I think you probably have different views on it, and I can argue with you.
Well, I mean, the main thing about correspondence, like you said, is the distance, is like the ability for objects to communicate with each other by reason why it's called correspondence is because apparently everything's communicating with each other. There is no such thing as space. Like there at the like fifth level, they talk about the concept that everything is really just at the same point in the universe, but in
Yeah.
order for anything to truthfully communicate with each other, there needs to be space between these objects, and then all of that is it's an interesting one because um, you correspondence is what it's called by the traditions, but it's actually called data by the technocrats because they don't subscribe to the whole everything is communicating with each other in like big objects don't communicate with each other the same way small objects do. So they can do some stuff on the smaller world with correspondence like things. So it's all about atoms. And so when you guys go through the techno gate in my game, you're really using data to get from one point to another, not correspondence. And really, you're moving your molecules, using this and using a um, what is that? like string theory and quantum physics in order to get you over there. But the big world, is still governed by um, there still is somewhat of a separation of the two. They might have, I guess they would have like what, string theory or something the equivalent to, in order to bring the two worlds together. But it's all about data, and I never really jumped really deep into the technocratic explanation.
Yeah, I think the data thing is just that instead of thinking of everything as matter, you think of it as information that the universe is like holding on to, and so you can, thinking about it as information, you can say like, well, information can exist anywhere. You just have to transfer it, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical thing while you're transferring it.
Right. Yep.
The tradition thing was, I think, normally with correspondence, it like you said, at the fifth sphere, it's like every place is all places at the same point at once. So, and it's supposed to, as your understanding in that sphere is gained, you get more and more towards that. And like the first iterations of that is like, I am going to stab somebody across the room, but I don't have to walk over there. I just have to understand that my knife is just a thing that exists, and so I can stab somebody 15 feet away. And it doesn't make sense, but it doesn't have to, because it's a game and it's all imaginary. Anyway, so
so moving on.
Let's move on to entropy. The principle of chance, fate, and mortality. I believe decay is also in there.
Yes.
I'll tell you my understanding of entropy. Entropy is all about probability and the concentration of energy versus the dissipation of energy. Because I come from where I learned the word entropy is chemistry, where it's all about the total organization of a system, right? So a lot of times when I'm using entropy in a game, I'm thinking of entropy in terms of probability, like and chance. Like if I could use entropy to make something random happen, kind of like in the last Technogate game, I think I used entropy to explain that movie Final Destination.
Yeah.
Like a high-level entropy mage could make Final Destination shit happen. They'd probably need a 4 in the time sphere, but we can talk about that later.
Yep.
What's your understanding of the entropy sphere?
So I mean, basically what you said. The only thing else that I understand is that it has like a deep connection with corruption and it's like Jor. I forgot to look that up. I was gonna do that, but entropy has like a direct connection with becoming a corrupted Nephandius mage. In its own right. There's other things that can connect you to all of that, but entropy has a strong connection to corruption and to being corrupted by using it.
Yeah, I think that's because in the game it has it's closely correlated with death and decay, and in the game, death and decay is associated with the worm, which in the game is currently not healthy because it's being imprisoned by the Weaver, which I'm not sure if we've actually talked about that on this season of the podcast. My theories about that.
We should do a whole episode on just that.
Yeah. But yeah, so fate as well. So like, if you wanted to Gias someone, let's say, I think entropy would be a sphere that you would use for that. What are you looking up right now?
So I am looking up. Let me get the segment here. Let's see that it was
Did you say it was Joer? Like
Jhor. Johar.
Jor?
Jor. So it says 88 is the first time that it's brought up. Dying and crossing over. Um, so it has stuff to do beyond the risks proposed by special or spectacular creatures of this realm. The Shadowland travelers also pick up a bit of Jor, the death resonance. Essentially, death becomes a part of the person who enters this realm. Although the resonance fades a bit with time, I'm told it never completely goes away. Um, so that's the first mention of it. The next big mention of it is. So in this, I've never really played a lot with, and I kind of have ignored this throughout my gaming career because nobody's kind of gone deep into death magic at all in any of my games. In fact, actually, a lot of this podcast I want to kind of go over some of the stuff that my players have never talked about in my games, which I forgot to make a note about. But one of them being the ability to have multiple active spells on you. But we'll get into that later.
Yeah, and actually, so this is about the resonance, which I don't think I've never seen it used in games to a significant degree. I think you could quite effectively, um, but it's never been used in our game. So this Jor would be a resonance of death, kind of like an aura.
Yep, and it's corrupting to a certain degree. Um,
Uh,
there's
Probably opens you up to whispers from the abyss.
that could be. Anyways, I'm not
All
gonna.
right.
I guess we don't need to get deep into it.
Yeah, let's move on to forces. The understanding of elemental energies. So forces is anything that involves the movement of energy from one place to another. Gravity is a force. Fire is a force. Uh, if you want to make bullets go faster, you probably want forces. If you want to make them go slower, you want forces. Um, One thing that I like about forces, that's one of those spheres that you can deal direct energy with in a mage game, and it does. I
Um,
think it's like double damage.
yep, it's two. For every success, you get 2 points of damage instead of one with forces.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily make it aggravated. How do you do that? Kind of goes into some of that kind of aggravation. There's there is pure like creating pure fire, like true fire, would damage a vampire in an aggravated way, but they talk about it in an interesting way that we might get into later on when we get into how do you do that. But forces is an interesting one because it can get all the way up to aggravated damage all the way by itself, but it's not as simple as a lot of people make it out to be.
Yeah.
To create true aggravated damage usually requires prime.
Yeah, I was going to say that the limited reading I did of the how do you do this basically said if you want to make damage aggravated, you're going to need the prime sphere, because your aggravated damages you are messing with the inherent nature of reality, and you need if you're going to do that, you're going to need prime. Like
Also,
all the other spheres, just reweave things. Prime is when you're creating or destroying something entirely.
yeah. And well,
Yeah.
just to let you know too, your camera's frozen on my
Uh,
thing for some reason. I don't know if it's frozen on your end too, but or if it looks
Frozen? Frozen? Let me try turning off my video and turning it down.
there you go. Now I can see you.
Will it work?
Yep. You are unfrozen now. It wasn't too
I'm
bad. You
looking
had a
at the
good. You
screen
were in a
right now.
good picture. Actually, it wasn't too bad of a picture for being frozen. But I thought,
Yeah, I moved everything around and replugged everything in like an hour ago, so um, I'm in different ports.
Ooh. All right, so
Anyway,
let's move on to
speaking
life.
of different ports, let's talk about life.
Oh. So yeah, we got life is the mysteries of life and death. So and I grabbed that from the wiki, and I kind of have some qualms with the I guess the mysteries of death kind of go along with life, but they don't have control over death. Dead objects are usually matter or entropy's sphere of
Yeah, but with life, you could theoretically bring something that isn't living to life.
yes. Yeah,
Um,
and you can also kill things with life. You know how to do. You can actually do
yeah,
damage with life. Um,
yeah, and so anytime you're trying to reweave the pattern of something that is living, you basically need life.
yep.
It's
And
although
then
that can get a little complicated.
yeah, there's
Um,
there's some complications there, but it's a pretty straightforward one. It's one that's easily your mind like forces. It's something your mind can easily grasp, and how each level. And I guess we should probably talk about. Well, we'll talk about I guess the levels at the end here since we didn't do it at the beginning. Um, so just kind of moving on. Next one, which is kind of also extremely easy to wrap your mind around. Actually, the next two are really easy. Matter is the principle behind supposedly inanimate objects. So I like how they put in the supposedly inanimate with quotation marks around
well,
inanimate
I
objects.
think that might be a point towards inanimate objects can have spirit
Yes. Oh, that
tied
is.
to them.
Well, and
Um,
also like vampires. Like a true vampire
oh,
in Vampire the Masquerade is a combination of life, matter, and prime, I believe.
I would
Or
assume prime,
at
yeah.
the very least, you need like life and matter to affect them. You can't use just matter or just life. Um,
Yeah,
but they are affected by matter in certain ways. There's like, it's all complicated and based on your paradigm a lot when it comes to that kind of interaction with vampires. But in any
yeah.
case,
The
matter's a pretty easy one though. In it's the turning lead to gold type
yeah,
stuff.
your basic alchemies. Uh, Also, anytime you're changing the form of matter, unless it's only life based, because I feel like you're doing something to a tree, you don't necessarily need matter. Um, but if you're doing something to a rock, you only need matter. As long as you're only turning it into some sort of other matter
Right.
or
Yep.
changing its form. Um, Trying to think of. Yeah, it's hard to come up with examples on the fly here. Um, so let's move on to mind, I suppose. The potentials of consciousness. Um,
Yes. So yeah, the potentials of consciousness is also another really easy one to kind of wrap your mind around. Mind is mind. you don't you don't quite grasp consciousness at this point. It's gonna be a rough ride for
yeah.
you.
And mind is actually a lot easier to talk about in terms of the effects. Um, so, like, if you want to speed up your thought processes, you need mind. If you want to uh, talk to somebody over, like, every single one of my the mage games I have played in have eventually developed something called the mind link. So
Mhm.
that all metagaming is now just we are talking to each other inside our minds. If you want to cause somebody to do something, that's mind. If you want to read somebody's mind, that's mind. If you want to send a message over a long distance, That's mind and correspondence. Oh wait, actually, that's something we could argue about, because my mage GM, Charles, basically said that at a certain level of mind, you no longer have to worry about correspondence. You no longer have to worry about distance. Actually, let's talk about it now. What do you think about that?
I mean, I guess I would have to read real quick on mind, but I would believe that mind um, is kind of linked to needing correspondence. But the thing is that there are rules about like correspondence isn't needed to make a lightning bolt shoot from one point to another. So if all minds are all linked in one giant mind, kind of thing, where there is no real one consciousness is just one big thing instead of so I could see how you could interpret it at a higher level that there is no such thing as individual consciousnesses, and that's how
Yeah,
you could
it's
get around with it.
all consciousnesses are the universe thinking, and
Right.
so that's the fundamental idea of us being able to talk to each other inside our minds. Um,
Which also
See, that's
feds
actually one of
into
those.
that the consciousness is what dictates that there's a consciousness that dictates reality. The general consensus
Yeah,
that dictates a lot of the rules of reality, which we can kind of get into a little bit later. But just to touch real base on that is that I always argue that there are certain things that are fundamental to the basis of the universe that regardless of human belief, because one of the big thing too is that before there was consciousness, there was stuff here supposedly. I mean, well, I guess you could, as a mage could argue that. Technocrat could easily argue this, but a mage might have, might be hung up on some of the concepts of the universe didn't exist until consciousness exists. But I think that a lot of mages would probably still agree that before humans existed, before the belief structure of humans existed, gravity was there. Like,
yeah. See, I've been struggling with this, and I think I have a way to finally explain this. So, in my conception, that goes against your idea. It's the umbral realms of Mars, Venus, Pluto, etc. The umbral realms existed first, and then the technocrats started telling people, okay, those places exist, but they are spherical rocks out there.
no,
And
because before the
that's,
technocrats, they found spherical rocks out there.
well,
Like,
yeah, but that was somebody's paradigm that they were creating when they did that.
so my argument against that is that there's no way that the realms existed first because there was no Umbra or Earth first. There was one realm that got divided into two, or at least that's what everything that I've ever read is that the Umbra and Earth were once one, or Umbra. There was no Umbra until there was an Umbra. Like,
That's right. Okay.
so that would be my counter to you. My second counter to
Okay.
that would still be on the kind of level of it's it's one of those things that you didn't need thousands of years before the technocracy got involved in any of this shit. We knew that the moon was a spherical object that hung out around us. We knew that this whole talk about how like we didn't believe the earth was flat back in the day. The earth there was maybe a time period where there was a lot of people who might have believed that, but for the most part, our historically our philosophers had figured this out back in Aristotle's day. He looked at the boats, he saw
Well,
them coming over the horizon. He was like,
yeah, I get
"That's
that. I get that. But that my argument in that realm is that that was the technocracy creating that reality, which is now a part of what we would call the material plane.
well."
But
So
before
you're
that, it
talking
was
about,
all just like spirit.
but you're
You know what?
talking about saying that you'd have
Let's
to
move on.
rewrite all of history, and the problem with that is that there's a bunch of mages that are still around from that time period. Like, so you have like Porthos and stuff, which would be, which
Yeah,
I
but
guess
if
as
we
a
ran,
GM you could run that with that and say that back in the day the Earth was flat, and then the technocrats changed the paradigm and it became circular. But my thing is the technocrats didn't come out until like the 14th century or something like that, like way beyond when we had figured out anything regard, like technocrats didn't exist at all until and they weren't even the technocrats then. You know, they weren't pushing for let's make the
okay,
world
I'll
round. They were making.
I'll admit my idea is half baked. We'll revisit it one day.
Anyways, yeah, we
All right,
should
let's
continue on.
yeah, because we're already
We're
we're
already
already over time.
over time.
Prime, an understanding of the primal energy of all things. I think I talked about this earlier. Anytime you're trying to fundamentally destroy or fundamentally create something, that's when you use prime. And anytime you want to transfer the primal energy of the universe from one place to another, you need prime. So, uh, what are your thoughts on prime?
Yeah, prime is the primal energy. It's the magical energy that powers everything. My I guess one big thing with me with prime is the um, I believe in the concept that there's a lot of prime in certain things like oil and stuff, which is why oil
Oh yeah,
gets to create gas, which gets to create all like so the oil fields are really just giant prime fields that the oil is TAS, and gas is refined with advanced science, which eventually became regular science, to create gas, and then is a fuel source that can be used by anybody. Which is why if I gave you a barrel of oil, there wouldn't be very much you could do with it without quote unquote advanced science that is beyond you to you. If I gave you a barrel of oil, could you create gas out of it, without
could
any
I
other humans?
personally,
Yeah, like if
me personally,
all humans died off and most of the structures were, that did all of this refining, could you go out and make gas out of it?
uh, it would take a while.
You might be able to, is what you're saying,
I
but you're
might
not
be able to.
sure.
I'm not sure how useful that would be if it was just me left. People just go around eating all the fucking apples that just.
But in any case, but
Right.
that's kind of my point, is that there's a special process to create some of this stuff, and techno science, especially when you go back in the day when it was, gas was magic basically back in the day. So
Yeah, but along those same lines, you're talking about TAS. Um, you know, in Werewolf, they have a physical representation of Gnosis, which is TAS that they can sometimes trade. Um, I think werewolves can actually like transfer Gnosis to spirits and stuff. So like they have an inherent understanding of Prime at like a level of 2 or 3. Obviously, they can't do what Mage's avatar does. Um, uh, and then TAS has resonance as well, right?
yep.
So you're in your example, crude oil probably has a massive entropic resonance to it, and refining it doesn't necessarily even get rid of it. It just concentrates the energy to a more usable form.
Hmm.
And the stuff that werewolves use would have a more I don't even know what the other resonances are. A wild resonance, um,
There's stasis,
chaotic.
entropic, and uh, dynamic.
Yeah, it would be dynamic. The wild.
Yep.
Um,
Because that represents the three: the wild, the weave, and the worm.
yeah, but it's all energy. It's about primal energy rather than force energy. It's about potential.
Right. Yeah. So it's not about electricity. That's
Yeah, that's forces.
that's forces. But
All right,
Prime can create electricity, which is why blah blah blah. Anyways, so going on. Spirit.
dimensional science.
Dimensional science. Comprehension of otherworldly forces and inhabitants. I do find it interesting that the wiki does have kind of a more technocratic slant. Primal energy is not really talked about in the traditions. That's much more of a technocratic thing. Anyways,
Yeah.
but this is also an easy one, but also a very extremely hard one for somebody that doesn't know much about the World of Darkness to understand. Spirit is actually not ghosts. Ghosts are underneath. They kind of can. Spirits are a combination of entropy, or ghosts are a combination of like entropy and spirit more. And there's a underworld and this whole other thing. But in any case, basically, spirit deals with anything that's in the Umbra or otherworldly things. This technocracy calls them other dimensions. Still haven't come up with the whether or we haven't still haven't solidified whether or not the technocracy calls it the Umbra or not. I'd say no, just because I don't think they share very many. They don't like sharing very many terms with the. An Umbra sounds like a very
Yeah.
magical thing. Um,
Yeah, I haven't even thought about that. I'm sure they do call it something different. I just haven't thought about it.
the other
Um,
dimension is what I've been using for the most part in our technocracy game. That it's
yeah, it's
all just
other
about
dimensions.
yeah, it's just the other dimensions that string theory talked about.
Actually, so this would actually be a question for you. Um, the awakening, because in tradition mage stuff, the spirit sphere is a lot about speaking with spirits and uh, like interacting with them. But dimensional science, not because technocrats think of them as aliens. It's a different dimension. It's like the upside down or some shit like that.
Hmm.
Um, so like if a technocrat wanted to imbue something with a spirit, like make a hypertech device that is imbued with a spirit, could they even do that? I'm not even sure. I'm sure that's in the book somewhere.
Um, Making fetishes for a um, technocrat would be more difficult, um, but Ghost in the Machine would be the.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean there are
not the movie, but
technological
the
spirits.
concept of a ghost inside of the machine is still kind of accepted. But the concept of ghosts and stuff is something that the technocracy has to accept. That there is a dead world with wraith that do stuff. So they might interpret it differently. They might say that that's not necessarily, when you die, that's not you, that's the wraith. It's just uh, you know, a conscious copy that has been degraded and damaged and brought over to another from another dimension. It's another dimensional aspect of you after you die. But they have to admit that there's still the concepts of ghosts and stuff like that. So putting stuff into machines and ghosts inside of machines, like wraith and spirits have Weaver spirits primarily, and wraith have a lot of access to the digital web and do stuff inside of this um, uh, technological world out there. So there's a lot of stuff about having ghosts inside the machine. So I would say absolutely technocrats have the ability to make fetishes, but in a weird way. It's much more about encasing and entrapping, which I guess a lot of mages do too. Not all of them are petting ghosts on the head and saying, "Please jump into this object."
Yeah, I think the disconnect is just like when we generally think of spirits, we generally go towards nature, but in the world of darkness, they went out of their way to basically say like, no, all this technological shit has spirits associated with it too, and so like a technocrat could theoretically, go into the other dimension and be like, hey, spirit of computer, you want to jump in this thing and help power it?
Right.
Like that would be totally reasonable for a technocrat to do.
Yeah,
Um,
they might not say that I'm talking to a spirit. They might even, and that's one of the things that's interesting about Paradigm is that it can, it can uh, color things differently for your vision. So I'm not talking to a spirit. I'm talking to an AI, even though it's a spirit. If you get into the raw mechanics of it, it's a spirit, but um, every once in a while you can easily say, hey, this is just an AI that I believe I'm talking with and working with, or
Yeah.
that I've even created by entrapping this other dimensional thing that I found. I'm calling it AI now.
All right,
Also,
we've
you're
talked about
frozen again.
dimensional science. We've talked about dimensional science enough. Let's move on to time, the strange workings of chronological forces and perceptions. Now, I'm actually interested to hear what your general considerations of the time sphere are, because I don't think it's come up a lot in our game and most of the games I've played. Honestly,
So
time is a tricky one.
time is a tricky one, but there's certain things you can, as a GM, that you can do in order to mess with time sphere use. So there's a lot of people who use who want to use time to be like, okay, I'm just going to look into the future and see what happens, um, and
Yeah,
or I just want
don't
to
do
look
that.
into the past and see what happens, and that
That
can
one's
there's
easier.
any of those two things are both easily kind of dealt with in the sense that depending on how they're doing it, how they're interpreting it, how specific they're trying to get, um, you can also just say that certain periods of time or certain areas are hard to see time. But it's the tricky one because it's the easy one to try and skip plot points. So one of the things that I've done in my game is if they tried using time to look into the future to see what happens, is the closer they get to 1999, the more blurry time becomes, and the more that time is getting messed up because there's a thing that's happening.
Yeah,
Um,
the classic time magic can't see beyond this point. Uh-oh.
yeah, and
I'm
that's
sorry, that was a main plot point of my last big mage game that I played in.
oh, cool.
It
Yeah,
was
it's a big kind of
just like,
plot
we
point
don't
in the
know.
current game that you're. It's a plot
Yeah.
point for a lot of things, that anything that is able to see into time, um, which is interesting because real side note, quick here is Star Trek has a thing now where they say that after in the 30th century or 32nd century, whatever century that they're in now in Discovery, that there's no time travel anymore, and that it's all been gotten rid of. So I wonder if there is a point in time where everybody was looking at in Star Trek, they were looking ahead and they were like, oh shit, like we can't do anything beyond, we can't
Wait,
time
wait,
travel and do stuff to this.
wait. Is that based on the new Discovery episodes?
Yep.
Okay, I haven't watched those yet. How many are out so far?
Like three, and it's not a huge spoiler at all
Cool.
or anything. It just is. It's just a thing they mention. It doesn't change really much or anything. It just is that time travel got banned at a certain point. Um,
Yeah, whatever. I have my own problems with Discovery. I like it, but it's problematic in certain ways. Actually, in the more fundamental way that it is not congruent with Roddenberry's like basic ideals. Anyway, so that's all 9 spheres. Should we move on to uh,
I think we should.
can
I
what
think
was
real
that?
quick, I was just gonna say we should just touch real quick on the 10th sphere, which is just that everybody argues that there might be a 10th sphere and nobody knows what the hell it is. And there's a bunch of books about, or a bunch of things about it, and then there's a final book that'll tell you what the 10th sphere is, for different endings of the world. But yeah, it's an interesting end of the game
It,
final thing that.
it is there like an actual like in-game thing about the 10th
Oh
sphere?
yeah,
Because
there's a 10th
I know you've
spot at the
mentioned it a
seat.
lot, but
Yeah, so so one of the things is that there's a council table in Horizon, the Concordia, I want to say, or something like that is the name of the planet. But there's like this Horizon Realm planet that exists out there. There's a called I believe it's Concordia, but it's basically the seat of power for the tradition mages. And what they have is a table there that I don't know where or how it came about, but there's 10 seats that are there, one representing each one of the spheres, and the 10th seat. Um, did the 10th seat appear at the beginning of the apocalypse? At some
I
point,
feel
I
like
believe.
I feel like that did happen in one of your games, where it was like a 10th seat just kind of was there at some point.
Right, and I can't remember the whole thing on it, but basically either a long time ago or just recently, a tenth sphere or a 10th seat appeared there, and there's always been a lot of speculation inside of the traditions about the concept of a 10th sphere, the unifying sphere, the sphere. It's the string theory of Mage, basically.
Yeah, I think my inability to get my head around it is what would be the use of having dots in that sphere? Like, what capabilities would it give you?
Possibly all
Is
of
there any?
them, nothing, something very special. But yeah, what doesn't all 9 of the spheres govern? It's kind of like saying, let's take Prime out of this, and then we can argue, what would there be left in order to create all of these things? And all of a sudden you add in Prime, and you can do a whole bunch more all of a sudden here. But without Prime, all of the other stuff makes sense, and Prime really is this, the magical energies of the, like stuff that doesn't exist at all. So there could be a 10th thing that governs something else that is, fake, basically, or made up in the game in order to create. So for example, I guess the 10th sphere in one of the endings is judgment, and so it's not like a sphere that you get powers inside of, as much as like it was the concept of, understanding all of the universe and everything that was going on in the game, the true understanding of the universe, and how it was all about judgment and judging everybody for all of their actions and all the things that they've done. And I
Yeah,
didn't even
it's
deep
just
into it. So, anyways,
it's
we
just
don't need to get deep into it.
really hard for me to get my head around the idea of a 10th sphere, like unifying, like actually just the idea comes into my mind, the idea that maybe it's because we're about to talk about how some of these fictional characters, you can come up with ways to explain their powers with spheres. What if there's a kind of base difficulty in combining more than one sphere? And maybe the 10th sphere is just some sort of limiting factor as to like how many spheres you can combine in one.
But there
at
isn't
once.
anything mechanically
No,
about that. Like
yeah, there's nothing preventing you from saying I do a spell and it's all 9 of them.
Yes, and yeah,
There
and,
is
and in
no
fact, actually, that's
increased difficulty.
yeah, mechanically they don't argue about that. The only thing, and in fact, Mage 20 makes it way easier because prior mages are the ones that could make a problem here. Prior mages, where they were like you had to assign a specific tool or specific foci to a sphere, and so you would have to use all of your different tools in order to accomplish this. In Mage 20th, they say tools are just tools. Whatever, you don't have to assign it to a specific sphere or anything. You can just use tools as long as it's within your paradigm, or foci that were within your paradigm.
All right. Well, along those same lines, let's talk about. Do you want to do simulating vampires, or should we just go to movie characters?
Let's jump into movie characters. You said you wanted to do John Wick because I want to
All
hear
right.
that. So
Okay, so the way I am going to do this is I'm going to go through the list of spheres and think about how. The basic idea is John Wick is actually an enlightened being. He has a ret. He has access to spheres, and he uses those spheres during the movies to do things. Now, I will admit it's been a while since I've seen any of them. So
I just watched the
correspondence.
third one recently.
Yeah, I mean, the John Wick movies. Well, let's not go into any critique of them. Let's just go into the character of John Wick. Correspondence. His ability to hit things could be affected by correspondence, correct? Like his accuracy.
His accuracy, you could have improved with the. I would say that he would have probably. I could see easily having like a level 1 in correspondence.
Yeah,
he also has access to some technology that gets him to level 3, but it's also technology that almost anybody has access to. But I think that he has some access and understanding of devices and stuff like that that would give him access to understanding and viewing things and like schematics and blueprints and stuff. You have to think.
Okay, yeah, kind of a situational awareness.
Right.
Yeah, like maybe something correspondence and mind. He's able to know all of his targets are.
Right.
That would be a sick spell. And that would only be level 1 in both correspondence and mind, I think. Kind of a constant effect that's on.
Well, I mean, the thing about correspondence is 1 really is only still within your perception. 2 is when you can start going extra perceptional, from my understanding.
I think, but with 1 in mind, a constant, always-on effect. That could be. It's just like he has a constant knowledge of all entities who intend him harm.
I mean, to a certain degree, you would have to have like probably entropy and added in there then in order for the chance based stuff.
Yeah, I could see that.
But yeah, I could definitely see. I would almost see him having like correspondence, entropy, life, maybe even a little bit of matter, mind, at like level 1. Forces level 1.
Let's go through it, and as we do, we'll kind of like come up with like effects that he would have going. And I would suggest the first effect that I would suggest is a correspondence entropy mind, where he's got like this kind of constant knowledge of where all of his opponents are.
You mean in a fight sequence?
And I would. Yes.
Not like a tracking hunter kind of thing you're talking about. Like, yeah.
No, because I think his correspondence would only be like 2, which is kind of like a little bit out of your perception.
Right. Yeah, so he might see things before, like he might not be able to be shot by a sniper bullet from, really far away.
Yes.
And I actually was reading like, on the forum.
It's like plot armor.
Right. It's like plot armor, and I was reading on the forum recently on White Wolf's, or not the forum, but the White Wolf's Reddit, or the Reddit page for White Wolf, or maybe Onyx Path, or one of the ones. But it was talking about it was a meme basically of when players run into mages and they're like, "What the hell? Like, what did these things have any weaknesses?" And the old wizard like goes, takes a puff off his pipe and is like, "Just one." And he's like, 9 caliber, 9 gauge or whatever, like whatever, and pulls out like a shotgun and shoots him. And it's like, people are like, "Yeah, the way to kill a mage is just to snipe them from afar." And I'm like, Yeah, but no. I mean, a lot of mages, yes. Let me say absolutely. But you don't have to be very powerful to have a spell. Like you can be an immediately, probably with spheres of level 2 like you're saying, you can avoid getting shot in the head by a sniper bullet.
Yeah. Although that would require an ongoing effect.
Right, but
In
you can have as it never says how many. You're limited by how many ongoing effects you can have. The highest that it can be is +3 to your difficulties. So if a mage wanted to kind of go crazy and not care about casting, it does all of its casting through rituals and bringing down the difficulty and all these other ways that you can do it, can get extremely high on the amount of active um, spells that he can have on him.
no, I feel like there was a like it's limited by your ret, isn't it?
No, not how many spells you can have active is
Yeah,
no.
like an
How
active
how much you
spell.
can lower the difficulty, yes, but how many active spells you can have? Just every 2 spells active gives a +1 to the difficulty.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So every time you have an active spell on you that's like kind of in perpetuity, it increases the difficulty of your magic rolls or your ret rolls in the future.
Right.
Oh, okay. I
And
guess I've never known about that rule. So I'm
yes,
learning.
that's a huge one, and that's one that most of my players never use. Is to have active. Now, a technocrat is actually it's a lot easier for you to imagine what these things are. You already have some active things on your characters that are active spells. So your force field that you have around you. When you have that force field around you, that's an active spell. That's a gadget that you guys are using, not a wonder.
Oh, so you're saying it's coming from our magic?
It's a gadget. It's so if you have 20, if you have all of these pin. Okay, so let's take it from a tradition point of view, real quick, maybe to help you. But so if I wanted to have my pin that protects me from magic missile, and my scepter that does lightning bolt, and my or well, I guess the scepter that does lightning bolt would be a little bit different because it's only when you're activating it. But my armor
Right.
that does has a magical field around me that protects me and stuff like that. All of even if it's items, unless it's all the way to a wonder. A wonder has its own arete and does its own magic. All gadgets and or trinkets, as they call them, are coming from you or are considered an active effect to a certain degree. A brooch of magic missile, or what is that called? Brooch of defection, or I can't remember what the one is in Dungeons and Dragons. But in
Yeah, it's the one
anyways,
that absorbs magic missile.
right. You in order to have that active, if it's quote unquote an active spell on you, you're that's an active thing that gives +1 to your difficulty when you have 2 of them active or more. 2, 4, 6, 8 gives +1, +2, +3, +4.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to John Wick and let's consider this effect. He's got a correspondence 2, entropy 1, mind 1 effect, always going, that gives him what mechanical effect? Because the way I described it was he constantly knows where all of his enemies are. Anybody intending him harm. Uh,
So I mean, by that
what?
kind of logic, the mechanics of it would also depend on how many successes that you build up. I mean, one of the things about mage is that you have an intent that you're trying to do. You need to state that intent. Then you need to state how are you doing that. What's the um, mechanical or the physical spiritual thing that you're doing in order to accomplish your task, which can be all the way from I'm just doing it because I'm a mage and I just can do anything, which
Well, yeah.
is technically possible. I'm just willing. Basically, you're just saying I will it into the universe.
Yeah,
all the way
you're
down to,
changing the fabric.
I have a ritual where I have to, dance and sing, and there's got to be a pot of gold and da 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 da, you know, in order to accomplish these tasks. So what is John Wick doing in order to do this? I would say that he's always, it's his training and stuff like that, his workouts and his training that he'd possibly
Oh,
even created this spell a long time ago. Um,
okay. I wasn't asking how he was doing it, but I like that question, and I agree. It's probably very akin to Akashic Brotherhood, where it's like martial arts, where he's like he has to renew the energy of the spell through meditation, uh, you know, training,
Workouts. Yep.
or simulations. Like he has to go to a firing range. He has to stand in the middle of a crowd and like think about shit in order to redo the spell. But the question I have is, how does the spell mechanically work when he's in combat?
Well,
Like,
but the
how do you
reason why I
simulate?
ask, so the thing is that you're missing here is that how you do something is extremely important is into how it mechanically is translated. Like I
Okay,
said, if you're just doing willpower, that's completely different than being in an Akashic Brotherhood mind state of having to do all these things. Because one is doing it beforehand, and one is doing it Johnny on the spot. Um, and it's just, I have a will around me that just protects me from this stuff. Would be
yeah,
a lot different than, I have this acute training that I have that sends off these things. So my way of doing it would be, there's a couple different ways that you can kind of go about this, and there's hard mechanics that you can do that just say if you get to a certain amount of successes, you're no longer jumpable. Like you always have, you're not able to. Surprise rounds don't work on you, basically. That when a niche happens, you always are involved inside of the pool of a niche, whereas surprise rounds you normally wouldn't be involved in that pool of a niche. Um,
okay,
you could give increases to that pool of a niche as well, because there's the problem. So one of the things that's kind of works out here though is that even if you lose an ish in the world of darkness, you can still dodge. So as long as you can't be surprised, that stops the bullet shooting you in the head. So even at a long distance, you're 40 miles away and you shoot, this spell would make it so as soon as the bullet gets to a point where you have the chance to dodge it, you're going to sense that it's coming and feel that it's coming, so you get to do spider sense dodge, and you get to take your dodge roll. Now, that doesn't stop you from getting shot. That just stops you from not getting surprised. You still have to take the dodge roll, which by being miles away and stuff like that, unless you're in the middle of an open field and there's nothing for you to dodge behind, you can usually probably get a diff 3 on your dodge to just get behind something.
or just get out of the way of
Well,
something coming at you.
right. I mean, and that's the other thing too. The more distance it
And
is,
that's what
depending
dodging
on
is.
how you. Well, I mean, mechanically, the mechanics of dodge. If you I don't know if you've ever looked up the rules regarding dodge, but there are rules
Well, dodge
regarding what
just
dodge is.
dodge removes successes from the attack roll.
Yes, but that's not the mechanics. What I'm talking about is the mechanics of dodge, which is what is the difficulty of dodge based upon whether you are in an open field or you have something that is easy for you to dodge behind. It varies on difficulty. Dodge can be all the way from difficulty 9 to difficulty like 3.
Okay, so if you were building John Wick, how would you mechanically give him like a better chance at dodging, like lower difficulty, or two like 5 free successes on every single dodge roll? How would you do it?
So I would probably, the more that I getting into Mage, the more that I've been sliding away from creating my own house rules on stuff and just kind of sticking to with what they have, which is kind of simple and easy. One of the things being lowering of difficulty. That's
Yeah.
Like added successes is not really well built into the system of you do this and you just get added damage. Usually mage is very much the um, either it lowers the difficulty or it does something very specific. Um, and so it there isn't a, a lot of play in the areas of the um, I don't know. Anyways, I would say that mechanically I would probably just give him the basis of lowering the difficulty on dodge rolls.
Okay. Would you give him a pool of dice, or like a pool of like he's got 10 at the beginning of every combat, and he can choose to lower the difficulty on dodge, or um, or is it just like
I would probably say it's part of the active effects that he would have going, and therefore it's just as soon as you do your thing, you could using the mechanical system of mage, you would have to do the rituals first. So he's doing all this working out and stuff like that in order to
yeah?
meditating and stuff. So that's when he's making his rolls to see how many successes he gets, and he would just get a lower difficulty for a specific period of time on all dodge rolls or all melee rolls or all firearm rolls and stuff like that, which can make mages ridiculously dangerous without actually looking very magical at all. Like the reason why John Wick probably is an expert martial artist beyond any expert martial artist is because instead of rolling at difficulty of 6 on all of his rolls, he's probably rolling at difficulty 3, which
And
just makes
that's what I
him
was going to say.
ridiculous. Like,
One of the phrases that exists in pretty much all World of Darkness. Actually, is it World of Darkness, or am I thinking of? No, it is World of Darkness. The effect lasts for a scene,
mm-hmm.
and so, like, I've watched John Wick. The entire movie is one scene. Well, kind of. But like, if he's got this like massive pool of dodge reduction that can last for an entire scene, he can just be like, I am going to reduce all dodge rolls by 5 for this entire scene, and nothing can hit him.
Yes. Well, and the thing is
Plus,
to say he might have that. It might not be something that he just needs to activate. He does his rituals, and because one of the ways that you can do it is you can set aside successes in order to extend how long it is. You can say a scene, but he could also just say in the beginning of the day, I'm going to have this for a year. That or well,
oh yeah,
I mean, depending. I think that's a lot of successes to get up to a year. I think not that many, but it gets more and more. But he probably does this ritual every day or every week, and it gets him a
well,
lower difficulty for that entire time. Like he's a
yeah.
walking
Well,
machine that just
you
decimates
could
people.
almost argue that in the first movie they explain his backstory as being this guy who like came up as kind of like this operator for shady organizations. He knows about the Assassin's Guild and all this stuff. You could almost argue that his backstory is a justification for a lifetime of his dodge difficulty is 3 forever, and the amount of dice that he rolls for dodge is probably 10
Right, because he's
in
got
every
Dex of
fucking
5
hit.
and
Dex of 5
athletics of 5. So
and athletics of 5. That's just it. And it's a difficulty 3 forever.
yep. No, exactly, and
And it's
that's
just because he did that.
right, because he did a ritual at one point that did that, and and that's how you can see how
That's his
he's not
backstory.
really using magic. He's using spheres, and this is how you can easily start translating concepts of like how do you change this for everything, and you can do that for like Spider-Man, where it but we were kind of going to get into deeper. I think we
Yeah.
should probably do another episode on this, since we're already a little over an
Well,
hour into the game or into the show.
well, actually, how about okay? Let's stop the podcast here. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back and Twitch subscribers only will
Well,
be
no.
able to hear the rest of our discussion about John Wick
Twitch
and how you
subscribe.
create it.
Twitch people. They don't need to subscribe.
People on Twitch, not subscribers. But please subscribe. Apparently, you should all subscribe. Everybody.
Everybody's watching.
I mean,
You
nobody's
should subscribe.
watching. Nobody's watching now.
But um, that's okay because they watch. They listen to us on our podcast. All 8 people that download it. But yeah, in any case,
Hey,
I think
8's a lot.
Hey man, I'm surprised every time I see a download
810.
happen. I'm like, oh wow, somebody listened to us. So thank you all for listening. Those who do comment, subscribe, don't comment, don't subscribe, don't care, love us, hate us, just keep on
Well,
listening.
suck.
That's
I mean,
but thank you
not
all
really.
so much for listening. We're definitely going to come back. Mage and Spheres Magic is a huge topic that we could probably spend
Yeah.
years
So-
talking about, but we're going to try and condense it down to 2 episodes.
So we're gonna leave, and the people that download this podcast, if you want to hear us argue about John Wick and how to make him in Mage for another 45 minutes to an hour, go to twitch.tv/Golden Age Gaming, which is GULDAN Age Gaming.
Awesome. Well, yes, that will
There
be.
you go.
We're saving that on here, so we'll probably create a special
Twitch-
highlight
Twitch
for that.
only.
So, yep, it's only going to be on Twitch. We won't put it on the podcast site because I'm not going to do more work for that. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and end this stream here, and then we're going to start
Oh, wait,
back
shoot.
up.
We gotta come up with a way to sign off.
Uh,
I'm sorry, I'm a little drunk, so it's a little easier to talk shit.
we'll come up with a sign off later, but
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
we'll figure it out. Maybe that's our sign out. We'll figure it out. All right. Have a good one, everyone.